I have never forgotten that look. The look of a woman who knew that death was waiting just behind her, yet still gazed at her child with a tenderness that seemed to defy the entire world. A gaze with no hatred, no panic, but a stillness so profound it chilled me to the bone, as if she had offered everything sacred in her soul to her baby before death could lay its hand on her shoulder. I stood there, amid a battlefield charred black, reeking of gunpowder, where the wreckage of a shattered afternoon lay in pieces. And I, a man who had long grown numb to the smell of burnt flesh and the screams of dying soldiers, could not bring myself to raise the camera. I was frozen. Not from fear, but because I knew I was witnessing something that transcended war, something so pure it felt unbearable to behold amid such hell. It was February 1972, in a resistance buffer zone in Bac Lieu, deep in the southern Mekong Delta of Vietnam. I, a British war photographer, was embedded with South Vietnamese troops and American advisors in an area they referred to as a stubborn stronghold, a patch of land they said needed to be razed to the ground to root out the insurgents. In all the years I had trudged through combat zones from Saigon to Quang Tri, from An Loc to the Laotian border, never had I felt the heaviness I did in this place. The soil here wasn't just damp with silt, it was saturated with blood. The people didn't scream when the mortars fell. They just bowed their heads as if resigned to being crushed. But that day, I witnessed something no one had ever told me about, something never reported in any dispatch or cable. A mother breastfeeding her child while encircled by soldiers, rifles raised, death imminent. I remember it began with an eerie breeze, not the wind from the sea, but a strange stillness that always seems to precede a storm. The radio crackled, boots splashed through shallow canals. We approached a small hut in the middle of a rice field. The commander barked, "She's in there. Nam Dong's wife. Take her alive." I didn't know who Nam Dong was, but the gleam in the soldiers' eyes told me they felt they had finally cornered something precious. They stormed the hut, kicked the door in. A woman screamed, then silence. I couldn't see inside, too many bodies blocking my view. Moments later, they dragged her out. A woman in her 30s, wearing a brown peasant blouse, hair tousled, cradling a baby no more than 10 months old. The child didn't cry. It just stared at her, and she trembled, but not from fear. I've photographed countless civilians being arrested, threatened, beaten. Fear has a distinct scent, a mix of sweat and terror. But she didn't have it. One soldier barked, "Where's your husband? Where's the hideout?" She shook her head. A slap. The butt of a rifle rammed into her side. Blood trickled from her lip. Still, she said nothing, but her arms never loosened around the child. Then came the command. The officer, face flushed, growled, "If she won't talk, shoot her. Bring me her ears." I stepped forward. I couldn't stay silent. I had seen enough massacres to know this was wrong, but just then she spoke. Not a plea, not a negotiation, just a murmur in Vietnamese that I didn't understand. The interpreter beside me whispered, "She's asking to breastfeed her child one last time." The officer hesitated, then waved his hand. She sat down beneath a broken wooden beam. The child latched onto her breast. The wind stirred. That moment, 1 minute, perhaps less, stretched into infinity, a sacred act unfolding in the middle of carnage, life asserting itself, however quietly, in the face of death. I raised my camera, not once, again and again, capturing each frame, from the way she smoothed the baby's hair to the way the child nestled into her chest. My hands trembled, not from fear, but because for the first time, I wanted to cry. Then the shot rang out. A single round to her back. I don't know who fired. She collapsed, arms still around the child. Blood spilled onto the dirt. The baby screamed. I took one last photo, then lowered the camera like a man whose soul had just cracked in two. I am not Vietnamese. I am not a soldier. I am just a foreigner. But in that moment, I felt as though I had lost my own mother. I can't explain it. I had seen so many corpses, but no death had ever hollowed me out like this one. That night, I returned to the base without saying a word. I developed the film with shaking hands, each negative cutting into me like shards of glass. In the dim red glow of the darkroom, her face slowly emerged from the chemicals. Those eyes, that stillness, and the way she clutched her baby like it was the last anchor tying her to the world. I had always believed that photojournalism was about revealing truth, about showing the world what war really looked like. But this time, I wasn't sure. I didn't know whether I was betraying her by exposing that moment. Would she have wanted to be remembered like this, or forgotten quietly, like countless other nameless women who died in silence? But then I remembered the baby's cry. That wail has echoed in my head ever since, a haunting reminder. Not everyone gets to forget. That child would grow up with a hole that could never be filled. If no one told the story, if no one preserved that final moment, would anyone ever know she existed? I sent the photo to the editorial office in London with a handwritten note. I do not know the name of this woman, but I know one thing. She died so that her child might live. And this is the only photograph I have ever taken that I wish I never had to take. When the Telegraph published the May 1st, 1972 edition, my photo was on the cover, along with the caption I had written in a storm of emotion. And in the desolate stillness of that twilight hour, among the ruins of a shattered village, I imagined that somewhere an unknown woman still sat nursing her child. Was it not a beautiful, eternal image of human survival? A symbol of life defying and forgiving this endless, senseless war, and the blind destruction brought on by men and their weapons. The world was shaken. The image spread across major newspapers, exhibitions, documentaries, history books. But I, the man who took that photograph, never once felt proud of it. Whenever someone praised me for my bravery in the field, I felt a knot tighten in my throat. I wasn't brave. I was helpless. I'd stood there and watched a woman die, and I couldn't stop it. I didn't hold the baby. I didn't stop the bullet. I only stood there and pressed a button. And maybe that, more than anything, is why the wound inside me has never healed. Years after the war, I returned to Vietnam. I wanted to find the child. I had no idea how. I only carried the photograph, now faded, and one name I'd heard whispered by a local official, Nguyen Thi Tu. I wandered through peaceful rice fields, down quiet canals, past homes now adorned with tin roofs and motorbikes. No more bombs, no more guns. But I still felt the echo of that afternoon with every step I took. Eventually, I found her, the child from the photo, now nearly 50 years old, living in Soc Trang. When I showed her the image, she said nothing for a long time. Then, she wept. Not loudly, but with slow, silent tears that slid down her cheeks like years of pain finally released. She told me she'd never known her mother's face, only stories from her grandmother. Each time she heard the song "The Last Drop of Milk," she cried and imagined her mother's arms. And now she had it, a single image capturing the final moment of her mother's life. I asked permission to light incense for Nguyen Thi Tu. In the quiet of that afternoon, with the scent of incense rising and the wind rustling gently through the trees, I felt my chest loosen slightly. I was no longer a reporter, just a man, bowing before a mother who had given everything so her child might live. The war is over. The photographs I took then now sit in archives. The reports, the headlines, The broadcasts have faded into the memories of an older generation. But one thing remains. My memory of that moment, that gaze, that death. And I've come to realize something. The greatest revenge against war is not more violence or hatred, but the courage to tell the truth, to look at atrocities without turning away, to remember the forgotten, to preserve the memory, even when it hurts. If you ask me why I still tell this story after all these years, I can only say this: because I owe her that, and I owe that baby, now a mother herself. I am no longer young. My hands tremble, my eyes blur. But whenever someone asks me about the Vietnam War, I don't talk about guns or battle lines or victories. I talk about a mother sitting quietly, nursing her child one last time before the bullet came. And I hope, no matter how faint, that those who hear this story will feel something stir. Not just sorrow, but a longing, a hope that no child anywhere in this world will ever have to drink the last drop of milk to the sound of gunfire. I remember the first time I set foot in this land. It was during the rainy season of 1971, when the vast rice fields of Bac Lieu were flooded white, and the skies seemed permanently covered in a dull gray blanket from dawn till dusk. People told me this was a soft danger zone, a vague term, but a meaningful one. Soft for its gentle appearance, yet laced beneath with a web of landmines, secret orders, and blood. I carried my camera, my backpack, a notebook, and a mind still filled with the scent of city life. But after just 3 days breathing the air between gunfire and the quiet clucks of chickens under a midday sun, I understood. War is not where you go to take good photographs. It is where you come to learn the depth of human endurance, forced to be stronger than it ever wanted to be. Back then, Vinh Hung Commune was a torn piece of land, caught between two forces. On one side, the South Vietnamese Army and American artillery set up dense outposts, planting 105mm cannons like growling beasts on the edge of the fields. On the other, barely a few hundred meters away, were rows of melaleuca trees, canals, and rice paddies, what they called the My Trinh Revolutionary Base. I never saw any base. All I saw were villagers paddling boats with medical supplies, women carrying rice across muddy banks, and barefoot children wading through water, still laughing. Death came quickly here, so people lived each moment with rare sincerity. It was as though each breath had to count because the next was never guaranteed. I stayed with the 401st Regional Force Battalion, sleeping under canvas tents, marching alongside them during search and destroy missions. They didn't like me much. Called me the foreign guy who takes pictures of corpses. Fair enough. I carried no gun, only a Leica and rolls of black and white film. But I remember the chill that sank into my bones on rainy nights, when the campfires went out and only the sound of the forest breathing remained. I began hearing whispers about someone named Nam Dong. Some called him the commune militia chief, others a cunning ghost. But all agreed on one thing. He had never been caught, and wherever one of his warning letters appeared, a local official or collaborator would soon disappear without a trace. They said his wife was a small, quiet woman who ran a roadside stall, lived legally under South Vietnamese control, cared for her elderly parents, and raised 4 children. No one believed that this woman was the bridge between enemy territory and the resistance base. But then, rumors intensified when a patrol unit was ambushed shortly after she was seen selling medicine nearby. No one dared accuse her openly. There was no evidence, only glances, an unusual stillness in the way she walked home from the market. And so, they started watching her. I knew none of this when I arrived. All I saw was a countryside so beautiful it ached, scented with damp straw and framed by birds rising against a violet sky. But I began to sense that this beauty was being slowly strangled by something unnamed. There were eyes peering from half-closed windows, children who fell silent when I passed, stories that faded mid-sentence, even with an interpreter by my side. Once, I saw her, not the day she was arrested. A few weeks before that, as we passed a small riverside hamlet, she stood outside a tiny shop, wiping her hands on an apron, gazing out toward the fields. I snapped a photo in secret, not for any reason. There was simply something in her posture that stirred me. A strange stillness amid the chaos. A figure who neither fled nor blended in, just stood there, like a marker. Later, when I reviewed old film rolls, I found that image, and I realized I had photographed her twice, once alive, once dead. That fact haunted me, as if I had unwittingly become the sole witness to a tragedy written long before I ever arrived. I still remember that afternoon vividly. The air was so thick, it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Gunfire roared in the distance, pounding closer and closer. My heart raced wildly, my hands trembled as I held the camera, yet I forced myself to steady it, because I knew I was witnessing something far beyond an ordinary moment. People scattered in panic. Children's cries pierced the air, blending with the desperate screams of mothers calling for their sons in vain. The stench of gunpowder hung heavy, sharp and suffocating, mingling with the acrid smell of burning straw and the damp earth of freshly plowed fields. I saw thatched roofs collapsing, men falling before they could even turn their heads. No one trusted their own eyes anymore. Every glance carried suspicion. Even the still figure of a passerby might mean death. I looked at the soldiers. Their faces no longer looked human, but like masks of stone, drained of emotion, carved deep with fear and tension. And then I saw her, sitting there, cradling her child in her arms. For a fleeting instant, all the chaos seemed to fall silent. Amid the madness, the image of a mother calmly nursing her baby appeared before me like a blade tearing into my chest. I pressed the shutter. Without thinking, without breathing, I knew I had preserved a fragment of truth, but at the same time, I had lost something inside myself. The gunshot came, and the world shattered before collapsing into a dreadful silence. I stood frozen, my senses numbed. War was no longer headlines, no longer reports or casualty figures. It was here, right before my eyes. It had a face, a cry, the final gaze of a mother. And me, I could never forget it. The ground shook with each blast of the 105mm shells, as if a giant hand were tearing apart the very guts of the fields. Flames rose from the thatched roofs, devouring every bundle of straw, every bamboo wall. No more crowing roosters, no barking dogs, only screams tangled in smoke and dust. Children ran in chaos, feet caked with mud, wailing in the arms of mothers who tried to shield them with their own bodies. Under the cold blue flashes of flares, corpses lay sprawled across canal banks, eyes wide open, voices forever silenced. The acrid stench of gunpowder mixed with the smell of burning hair and scorched flesh, thickening the air like an inescapable nightmare. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades shrieking like predators, searchlights hunting down the shadows of people fleeing across flooded paddies. Those who didn't fall in time became silhouettes ripped apart in the night. The soldiers, faces smeared with sweat and blood, stormed into every house, overturning ragged mats, dumping half-cooked rice onto the ground. They shouted, cursed, ripped away cradles and sacks of grain, as if everything, even the smallest thing, were the enemy. That night, the fields were no longer fields. They became an open graveyard, where the black, swampy soil swallowed every drop of blood, every desperate cry, then sealed it all in silence. I once thought war ended when the guns fell silent. But I was wrong. The true cruelty of war is not found in the corpses scattered across battlefields, but in those who survive and return. Mothers who lose their minds, speaking only to the darkness. Children who grow up never knowing who their fathers were. Soldiers who sleep with their eyes wide open, unable to tell the difference between dream and reality. I once saw a 9-year-old child pulling worn sandals from a mass grave, trading them for a loaf of bread. I heard the sobs of a wife clutching a rotting uniform, holding it as if it were her husband one last time. And I saw the hollow gaze in my own reflection. When I no longer knew if I was a reporter, a witness, or a silent accomplice to death. No one wins in war. There are only survivors, carrying wounds of the soul that fester like cancer. Bloodless, yet rotting day by day. War may have ended on paper, but in the dreams of the living, it still explodes every night. Every time a motorbike roars past on the crowded street, I flinch, thinking it's an artillery blast crashing down on some forgotten rooftop. My hand still grips instinctively, tight, rigid, as if I'm holding my camera in the trenches, though I'm merely seated in an old cafe at the corner of town. Some nights, I dream of the mother in the photo, the last drop of milk. She no longer weeps in the image. Instead, she smiles and walks toward me, blood trailing down her chest like a silent accusation. I wake at 3 a.m., drenched in cold sweat, switching on every light in the house like some terrified boy hiding from a ghost. I've taken hundreds of photographs of war and death, but only that one haunts me like an addiction. Once, I sat quietly in a small cafe, staring into a glass of coffee laced with condensed milk. And in its swirling surface, I saw again that white stream mixed with blood flowing from the woman's breast. I saw it on the cracked tiles of a public restroom wall, on the shirt of a lottery-selling street child, in the eyes of a vendor ladling hot porridge into a bowl for her son. No one knows what I see. They just think I'm a strange old man. But the truth is, I haven't lived since that day. I stopped taking pictures. I can't. Because every time I raise a camera, it feels like betrayal. Betrayal of them, the ones who died. Betrayal of the last glances I captured before their light went out. And most of all, betrayal of myself, the man who once believed photography could redeem memory. Every time a motorbike roars past on the crowded street, I flinch, thinking it's an artillery blast crashing down on some forgotten rooftop. My hand still grips instinctively, tight, rigid, as if I'm holding my camera in the trenches, though I'm merely seated in an old cafe at the corner of town. Some nights, I dream of the mother in the photo, the last drop of milk. She no longer weeps in the image. Instead, she smiles and walks toward me, blood trailing down her chest like a silent accusation. I wake at 3 a.m., drenched in cold sweat, switching on every light in the house like some terrified boy hiding from a ghost. I've taken hundreds of photographs of war and death, but only that one haunts me like an addiction. Once, I sat quietly in a small cafe, staring into a glass of coffee laced with condensed milk. And in its swirling surface, I saw again that white stream mixed with blood flowing from the woman's breast. I saw it on the cracked tiles of a public restroom wall, on the shirt of a lottery-selling street child, in the eyes of a vendor ladling hot porridge into a bowl for her son. No one knows what I see. They just think I'm a strange old man. But the truth is, I haven't lived since that day. I stopped taking pictures. I can't. Because every time I raise a camera, it feels like betrayal. Betrayal of them, the ones who died. Betrayal of the last glances I captured before their light went out. And most of all, betrayal of myself, the man who once believed photography could redeem memory. I started drinking on the day I realized I could no longer write. The unfinished articles, the stories of war that never found their endings. I left them scattered across my desk, buried in the drawers, smudged by rainwater on crumpled sheets that were never sent. Alcohol didn't make me forget, but it dulled the vision of blood in a glass of water, silenced the screams I heard in the wind sneaking through the cracks of my windows. I lived alone, in a damp attic filled with yellowed newspapers and unopened books. I never married. She, the woman I once promised to come home and wed, left one cold winter morning. Her only farewell was a single line scribbled on the back of an old envelope. You're no longer someone who knows how to love. You've become a shadow of sorrow I can't live beside. I never blamed her. How could someone young and full of light love a man who had left half his soul in a trench? I once believed I would return and become whole again. But I couldn't. I began writing letters to myself, long, angry letters, quiet confessions I couldn't utter aloud. And then I burned them. I'd sit and watch the flames eat each line slowly, as if devouring fragments of memory. But memory never burns completely. Somewhere deep inside, the ashes remain, and the scent of loss never fades. I started writing again, not for the press, not for publication. No one waits for my articles anymore. But I write because I owe them. I owe those who fell in silence, those without names, without graves, without anyone to remember them in the victorious headlines. I write for them, and I write for myself. The names that have faded from collective memory still burn vividly in my mind, like scorch marks on skin. I write about An, a young soldier of only 18, who proudly showed me the hair clip his little sister had sent from home, just minutes before a mortar blast tore open his chest. I write about Lieutenant Dung, the man who handed me his last battery so my camera could work, smiling as he said, "Take the shot. No one will believe I was ever here." He died 30 minutes later, trying to drag a wounded comrade to safety. I remember each face, each glance cast at me as if to whisper, "Tell them I was here. Don't let me disappear like I never existed." There are stories I've never told a soul, stories too raw for the polished language of newsprint. The guard who died standing up, frozen in duty. The young officer who cradled his friend's corpse for 3 days because there was no one to take over. I wrote it all in an old notebook, each page a wound reopened, each sentence a piece of my soul laid bare. I plan to turn it into a book. I plan to turn. The title has lived in my mind for years. Those Without Graves. I know no publisher would likely care. That's fine. This book isn't meant for glossy shelves. It's meant to rest in some forgotten museum corner or a dusty library, waiting for someone someday to stumble upon it and realize these people once lived, they once loved, they once hoped, and they died without a single goodbye. I never thought I would return to those lands, not after all these years. But then the girl from the photo, the one with the last drop of milk, found me. By then, she was a woman in her 40s, her eyes filled with both strength and a quiet hunger to reclaim something time had stolen. "You took that picture," she said. "I think, if you come with me, I'll be brave enough." I was silent for a long time. That photo, the one I thought had been buried among hundreds of blood-soaked rolls of film, came alive again, calling me back. We began the journey. The car rolled slowly over red dirt roads, through rice fields now replaced by housing blocks, past places once ablaze with gunfire, now echoing with the laughter of children playing soccer. Every step clenched my chest tighter. She called it a healing journey. I called it penance. We reached a small village on the border of Tai Ninh. There, I met an old woman with silver hair and blind eyes, sitting on her porch every afternoon, clutching a torn, faded soldier's shirt. When I asked, She repeated only one sentence. "He'll come back. He's just taking a long time." Her son had died in 1975, but she had never received word, never saw a body. And in her mind, the war hadn't ended. It was just holding its breath. In another place, near the Cambodian border, I met an old man who kept a broken camera like a sacred relic. It was a Pratica, one I had used. I recognized the faint scratch on the body, the chipped lens mount, the jammed film winder. I whispered, "Why do you still keep it?" He stared at me for a long time, then said softly, "Because it captured the last moment of my wife. She was hit by shrapnel right after. I couldn't hold on to her, but I held on to her gaze through that camera." I turned away, not out of sentimentality, but because I saw myself in him. I too had clung to a photo, thinking it would redeem me. But it didn't. Only when I shared it, only when I returned, when I faced every place, every person, I realized pain cannot be erased, but it can be heard. I was no longer a reporter, no longer chasing headlines, no longer dragging my camera through jungles and rivers to capture moments soaked in blood and mud. I had placed my camera on the old wooden shelf by the window, where the afternoon sun could touch it, drying the dampness of the past. But I never abandoned memory. I only learned to preserve it in a different way, gentler, quieter, as if cradling the ashes of something sacred that had been lost. I began teaching photography classes to children in rural villages, kids who had never held a real camera, only familiar with their parents' old phones used to call each other from the fields. Every afternoon, they gathered in a circle around me, their eyes lighting up when I spoke about light, angles, and the things a camera couldn't capture, like the rhythm of sorrow or the tremble in your hand when taking the last photo of someone who wouldn't survive. One child asked, "Uncle, can taking pictures save anyone?" I didn't answer right away. I just said, "At least it keeps them from being forgotten." I began restoring old photos, film rolls once left scattered in dark, moldy storage, as mildewed as my own mind. Some frames were blurry, others out of focus from trembling hands, and some only caught half a face. But they came back to life. Every pair of eyes, every torn shirt, every cracked smile amidst the gunfire. I hung them on the wall, each with handwritten notes, not press captions, but whispered truths. His name was Loie. He never made it home. Or, this little girl cried because it was her first taste of milk, and her last. Finally, I created a space I called the Memory Museum. Not grand, no entry tickets. Just a small countryside house, each room dedicated to a theme. Those without graves, love and gunfire, children who never grew up. But the most special part was the wooden mailbox at the entrance. On it, I wrote, "Leave behind a memory you once buried." People came, and they wrote. Some letters were unsigned, trembling with guilt. I ran and left him behind. Someone left a blood-stained handkerchief. A child silently drew a soldier without a face. I never asked, never needed details. I just kept them. Like a dream keeper, I stored those fragments in little drawers, not to display, but to preserve. Because I believe, only when a nation is no longer afraid of its past, can it walk into the future with steady hands. I have grown old. Not the kind of old that decays, but the kind that softens like roof tiles after rain. Quiet, moss-covered, but still embracing the sky of memory. My body no longer keeps pace with journeys, with sleepless nights, with the moments I used to hold my breath behind the shutter in the rain of bullets. And yet, my soul, strangely, has grown lighter, more at peace. There is no more hatred, only gratitude for what was lost, and a quiet tenderness for what remains. I often sit alone in a small garden, under the shedding shade of an old almond tree, The tea I brew is no longer as strong as it once was during those jungle nights. Just enough warmth to touch my lips. On the table lie old letters, paper yellowed with time, the handwriting trembling but full of feeling. I read each line as if I were reading the heart of my younger self. Some of the letters were never sent. Some lines say simply, "Today is your birthday. I'm still alive." Once a year, on the day the photo The Last Drop of Milk was taken, I go alone to an unnamed cemetery on the city's outskirts, a place where graves lie side by side without names, just mute stones among the wild grass. I place a single white flower at the foot of any grave. No one knows who lies beneath. I don't need to. To me, they are all the ones I couldn't save, couldn't name, could only capture for a moment before walking away. I don't pray. I just stand there, silently, for a long time, like I'm waiting for someone to rise from the soil and ask, "Where did you take the memory of us?" And I would smile softly, whispering, "I'm still carrying it, in every breath I take. I am not afraid of death. What keeps me awake at night isn't the pain in my chest or the breath that grows heavier with each passing day. It's the fear that these photographs might be forgotten, that the faces of those who once lived, captured in their final moments, will vanish from human memory as if they never existed. I've spent a lifetime bearing the weight of unnamed deaths, a survivor haunted by the silence of the fallen. And now, with my days drawing to a close, I have only one final wish. Do not let these photographs be lost to time. I once thought photography was merely documentation. But it is more than that. It is the last refuge of many souls. There are soldiers who never got to say their final words. Children who never learned what peace meant. Mothers, like the woman in The Last Drop of Milk, who became eternal in a single trembling frame amidst gunfire. They have no gravestones, no memorials. All they have are these photographs I have carried all my life as a sacred debt. Promise me this. No matter how many years pass, no matter how the world changes, do not let these images fade away. Because for some, the photograph is the only place where they still live. And we, the ones fortunate enough to survive, owe them the truth, a retelling, a gaze unflinching into the past. However late it may be, it must be done. If you'd like, I can now help you write the epilogue or the next chapter, focusing on the legacy after the photographer's passing, such as how the archive was preserved, or how the Museum of Memory continued to inspire others. Let me know. War doesn't end when the guns fall silent. Treaties may be signed, borders may be redrawn, but human hearts are not stitched back together by paper alone. I have seen a mother clutch a scorched photograph of her son for 30 years. I have watched a child grow up among rubble, never knowing a single day of true peace. I have heard the screams of veterans in the middle of the night, men who believed they had forgotten. And I understood then. War continues to live on in those who have walked through it. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we remember it. Not to fuel hatred, but to foster understanding. Not to repeat it, but to prevent it. Every photo I took, every word I wrote, was never meant to glorify pain, but to pass down a debt, the debt of truth. Only when we dare to look back, to face the memories, the losses, and the guilt, can war truly come to an end. Only when pain is called by its name, listened to, and preserved, can hope begin to grow. So please, do not turn away. Please, remember. Because if we forget, history will write itself in blood once more. If you've made it this far, maybe something inside you is stirring too. Maybe it's a memory, a face you can't forget, or maybe just a quiet sigh. I'm not asking you to become an activist or do anything grand. All I ask is, next time you see a photo of war, a quiet old veteran, or a child staring into nothing. Pause for a second. Look closer. Feel more. And remember, tell what you know. Write what you've heard. Don't let memories disappear just because no one talks about them anymore. Because sometimes the best way to say, "I haven't forgotten," is to share, to keep, to continue. And if someone once gave up their peace so we could live in ours, then maybe the least we can do is not live carelessly. Thank you for staying with this story, not just with your ears, but with your heart. In a world that moves too fast, the simple act of slowing down to listen, to reflect, and to feel something from the past is truly rare. You're not just a listener, you're a keeper of memory. And by doing so, you help ensure that the things which should never be forgotten continue to live on. Thank you for your empathy, for your depth, and for allowing your heart to open to a pain that didn't belong to you, but could have. We hope this story stays with you in some quiet corner of your soul, and from there, helps carry a little more kindness, a little more listening, a little more humanity into the world. See you again in the next story, where memory, emotion, and truth continue to unfold.